we have Adam Kessler will introduce a bit about the standard and give you a gallop through, and then Nebil, Kellow, who is Managing Director of Enterprise Partners, will give you a taste of experience from the field. I can see people are still getting connected. Before that, I am going to give you a 2-minute introduction to DCED, and then we will show our new, I think, 3-minute video, which is still in draft alpha beta version for you to comment on as an introduction to the standard. So that's it. What's DCED? A quick video included, introduction to the standard by Adam, experience of enterprise partners, and then we've got half an hour of questions and answers and discussion. So what's DCED? It's a forum, a club, a think tank. It's somewhere in between all of those, with bilateral donors and UN agencies and a foundation trying to exchange experience about what's effective. Nicodem, I wonder if you'd mind turning off your camera. It dominates the screen a bit. Actually, there may be a way to turn it off. There we go. Yes, DCED. It covers many things. It's a broad church. It covers business environment reform, market development, partnership mechanisms, particularly private sector engagement. Now we have 6 working groups, one of which is obviously results measurement, but the other 5 are all very active on market systems, aka beam exchange, private sector engagement, green growth, women's economic empowerment, and business environment reform. So if you like, some of the main issues that particularly donors are engaged with, and results measurement is one that everyone agrees is a tricky one to crack. So we've done a lot of work on this over the years, and the standard has been around now for 10 years. We're celebrating the 10th birthday of the standard. I can answer questions about DCED if you have them, but my final comment on that would be, do use the website. There's a lot of knowledge on the website that we've tried to make as accessible as we can. Our members are extremely busy, so they're always asking for brief summaries of key topics, so you will find synthesis notes and headlines, and if you're short on time and want to get up to speed, hopefully you'll find exactly what you need on any topic that we cover. Now, let me go to the video and show you briefly 2 minutes 25 of a new video introducing the standard. And you saw it here first because we've only just completed it yesterday, and we welcome comments to the Secretariat if you have any on the content of the video. Here we go. There you go. As I say, it's our first effort, and we would like to get your feedback. What I'm going to do now, I'm going to hand over to Adam to take us through the standard.
Okay, thanks a lot, Jim. What I'm going to do is just give you a very brief introduction to the DCED standard, kind of building on what was in the video to explain the different 7 elements. And then I'm going to hand over to Nebil, who will talk about the application of the DCED standard in a program in Ethiopia, Enterprise Partners. So if you have any questions, please put them in the chat box at any time, and we'll get to them either as we're speaking or towards the end. So let's start with element 1 of the DCED standard, which you can see on the screen, develop the results chain. And this is kind of the building block of the DCED standard. This is the first thing you need to do, and what the rest of the results measurement system is built on. And the results chain is just a chain of expected changes, starting with your program activities, leading through to the outputs and outcomes, and showing how they contribute to achieving your impact. And the results chain should show the different steps along this pathway and what assumptions you're making. And the aim is to avoid something that you often see in programs, which is illustrated on the right in this kind of mini results chain, where programs are quite clear about their activities, in this case advocacy and training retailers, and they're quite clear about their impact, but it's not very clear how one leads to the other. So the intermediate steps between your activities taking place and your impact occurring need to be kind of clearly outlined in a results chain. And this helps improve the program clarity and design because it makes you reflect on whether your activities really are sufficient to reach your goals. And it also provides the basis for assessing to what extent changes are taking place, because it points you towards what you need to monitor. Let me talk about what these kind of intermediate changes are. So in this kind of example results chain, on the left-hand side, you've got something around advocacy to government. Your results chain should answer questions like these. So what are you advocating to government about? Why do you think this issue is particularly important? What changes do you expect the government to make as a result of your advocacy? Do you expect them to provide more services to farmers, or less services, or stop interfering with the market or start interfering? All of this needs to be laid out. And finally, you need to show in the results chain how this will affect farmers. Is it through price of crop or productivity or access to export markets or whatever? And the same is true for training retailers on the other side. Cool. Yeah. So if your activity is training retailers to give quality information, the kind of questions you would want to ask are, is access to information a problem? Like, is there really a gap which needs to be filled? What are the incentives for retailers to give information? In other words, what changes take place which incentivize them to continue? What information is given? How do farmers work with this information? So hopefully these kind of discussions really help to clarify your program. It helps to draw out what the kind of key changes are and whether you're going to reach your goals. And it also sets the basis for the rest of your monitoring system. And this is because your indicators are taken from the logic of the results chain. And what this means is that for every step in the results chain, you expect an indicator to match it. If one step in your results chain is that farmers increase income, then you'll have an indicator which tries to measure whether this increase happens or not. And this shows you whether change happens at every different step in the results chain. Alongside this, you want to collect qualitative information. You don't just need numbers, you also need to understand how and why these indicators are changing. And this will come from feedback from your participants or beneficiaries or whoever is kind of critical in your intervention. As part of this kind of measurement, we say you need to measure attributable change. And assessing attribution is often a kind of critical concern of results measurement systems. The idea behind attribution is really simple. If you observe a change, let's say that farmers increase their yield, you want to understand whether this change was because of your intervention or because of other reasons. Maybe it was weather, maybe education system or government support, whatever. So attribution is an attempt to answer the question of how much of a change was because of your program. And there are many complicated attempts to look at attribution. You've maybe heard of randomized controlled trials, quasi-experimental trials, and so on. And the DCED standard certainly recommends that you use them if they're appropriate for your context, but we also recognize that often these are either too expensive or it's not possible to use them for a methodological reason. In this case, at the minimum, you're expected to look at every change that you kind of create, look at other influences for this change, and try to look at whether these changes can plausibly be attributed to your action. In other words, do participants say that you were a major role in the change? If the government changes its kind of behavior based on your advocacy campaign, does the government give feedback crediting your advocacy campaign for this? Or were there other influences, maybe other donors or other political influences, which made this happen? So trying to understand this is really important for getting a credible set of results. Okay, on to element 4 of the DCED standard, looking at systemic change. And systemic change is often a kind of preoccupation of market development programs, because you're not trying to create change just in one business or just in a small number of farmers. You want to influence the market in order to benefit a larger number in a sustainable way. This doesn't work very well. So what this says is that systemic changes have 3 main characteristics. Firstly, scale. Secondly, sustainability. Thirdly, resilience. They reach a large number of people. They do so in a way which continues past the end of your program. And this change is resilient to other changes. In other words, if there's a market shock or, I don't know, an economic crisis, the change which you facilitated will continue. And looking at these changes is really complex, and there's been a lot of work and thinking gone into how you can do it. But at a minimum, you should say, what are the systemic changes you're looking to see? Try and articulate and monitor a pathway to get there. So let's go on to elements 5 and 6. These are much easier, tracking costs and reporting results. So the DCED standard says that you need to track your costs in order to put the achievements of your program into context. In other words, if you spend £1 million or £100 million, you would expect very different levels of achievement. So you need to track your costs in order to demonstrate this. And reporting results in the interests of transparency and also learning in the wider sector. The DCED standard recommends that you produce an annual report, which is then made public or at least made available to your key stakeholders. So now we go to the last element of the DCED standard, managing the system for results measurement. And this addresses a really common problem in monitoring, that a lot of information is gathered, but then it's left kind of gathering dust on a shelf, or no one looks at it again once the analysis is done. And this is a problem because you need this information in order to adjust your program as you go. I think this is captured quite nicely in this cartoon, which shows that you start off often with a very simple plan, a very linear results chain, or program design document showing a clear pathway towards your goal. But reality, as the dinosaur in the earlier video tried to show, is quite different to what you expect. You get unexpected changes or reactions from your stakeholders, and you need to be able to get monitoring data and then adjust your program as you're going. So this is what the last element of the DCED standard is about, making sure that you have a system and a culture which enables you to use results for management. So I think that is, oh no, I have one slide, which is just on next steps. So if you want to learn more about the DCED standard, you can go to the website. If you go to Enterprise Development, you'll see the DCED website, and there's a page on the DCED standard with guidance and case studies and so on. Please contact us at the DCED with any questions. We're very happy to give any kind of advice or support where necessary. And you can find other resources like consultants or other programs using the DCED standard who you can kind of communicate with online. So if you have any questions, please put them in the chat box and we'll get back to them towards the end of this seminar. And now I'm going to hand over to Nebil, who is going to talk about the experience of using the DCED standard in enterprise partners. And let me just try to give him the presentable. Sorry, this is needed to change slides. There we go. I see someone scribbling on the slides.
Okay, I'm just checking that it works. I'm not sure what the squiggles are. Thank you so much, Adam, and thank you, Jim, for inviting me to talk today. I can see there are a number of Ethiopians on the call today. Salam Nacho. My name's Nebil. I'm from Enterprise Partners. I run this program. Enterprise Partners is a DFID-funded project that's now in its final year of 7 years. and our goals are essentially to create jobs for Ethiopians. And we have a number of sectors that we work in, mostly in the manufacturing or in the agro-industrial sectors, and we also do a lot of financial sector work to ensure that there's sufficient financing to drive that growth that will create those jobs. I'll just say a few things about Ethiopia to contextualize our project. Ethiopia is a country that has been growing at a very rapid rate, the fastest growth probably in Africa over the last decade. In some years, probably #1 in the world. But it's coming from a very low base, and it's still very agricultural driven as an economy. Our goal in Enterprise Partners is to ensure that growth is inclusive in terms of ensuring that it's labor intensive and jobs intensive. It's inclusive of women, particularly we have a goal around women's economic empowerment, and to ensure that it's environmentally sustainable. So there's a whole lot of challenges to making the markets work in Ethiopia. We come from a very socialist background and previously a communist country, and there are still a lot of hang-ups about how markets should work. And anyone who knows Ethiopia will know that the government has probably the major role in the market. So a very interesting place to do a market development program. Okay, we've done a lot of things so far. Some of the results are on the slide. I won't go into the details there, but we've created a lot of interesting programs, some that work with the private sector, some that work with the public sector, some that work with both at the same time. We've brought in credit lines from development finance institutions to invest in women-owned businesses as small, medium enterprise loans. We've created recruitment platforms for workers across the country to be mobilized and to migrate to be able to work in industrial parks. We've done a lot of work around promoting investment into Ethiopia with the government, with the private sector, to really bring in a much more significant capacity. The sectors that we work in traditionally in Ethiopia have been sectors where the customer is also an Ethiopian, meaning it's a domestic market, and we've now been helping the country to penetrate the global value chains in the garment sector, in the leather sector, in fruits and vegetables, or horticulture as it's known. So we've done a lot of work around getting markets to work. We've had a lot of challenges along the way. It's been 6 years since we started the program. There's been a lot of things have changed, and I'll just point out 4 things here. Our project is very big. It's about a £45 million project. It works in 6 sectors, which are all quite different. Half of the project is a financial sector deepening program, and half of the project is an agro-industrial program. So we work with farmers, we work with factories, we work with banks across different sectors. So managing a large and complex project has forced us, I think, to be very disciplined about how we do things. I can see there's 2 number 3s here. That wasn't the intention. The second thing is Ethiopia is a country that 25 years ago was the only actor in the private sector was the state. So all the businesses in Ethiopia are first-generation businesses. They're all generally new, small, and weak. So across the board, we struggled with businesses that just don't have the capacity. And in a market development program, you're always looking for a combination of skill and will, and that skill is a huge challenge. The third big challenge is that the country has changed a lot since we started. It's been through numerous transitions. It's been through we're now on our 2nd Prime Minister in Ethiopia. We work with the Ministry of Industry. We're on our 4th or 5th State Minister of Industry. We're on our 6th Investment Commissioner. So we've had a lot of turnover of people. We've had 2 states of emergency. So our ability to do things has been changing almost on a week-to-week basis in different geographies of Ethiopia. But the fourth one, which links to the first 3, to be honest, is something that I've personally struggled with since I've been working in development now for the last 6 years, is we don't have data and feedback to tell us what we're doing. And I think that's the hardest part of development, especially because most of us are in development because we have a passion for what we do. We want to make people's lives better. So it comes from a very emotional place, which I think makes it hard, especially when you lack data and feedback on a very consistent basis. It makes it hard to navigate. The image that you see there under number 4 is the screen that I used to use in my old career. I used to work in finance, and that's a Bloomberg terminal. And so when we would make investment decisions, we would get feedback every second of every day on how our portfolio was doing. So if you've made good or bad decisions, you didn't need to wait for an MRM report. It's constantly there all the time. And in life, a lot of sectors are like that. Imagine if you're a marathon runner. We're marathon runners in Ethiopia. You have constant feedback. You just look with your eyes as to whether you're at the front in 2nd, 3rd, 4th, whether you're catching up with somebody or not catching up. And so the lack of data in our country and just the lack of data systems in Ethiopia is a big challenge. But in development, just the lack of that continuous feedback into what you're doing was a huge challenge for us. So that brings me on to building an MRM system. So when we started the project, we had 1 person out of a team of about 30, 40 at the time, who was called the MRM officer. And so we sat down and we said, what can we do? How can we build a system? And I remember that person's job was to sort of say, well, my job is to report to the client the results that we get as a project. And I thought, okay, so who's there to tell us what we're doing and whether it's working or not? And he said, yeah, we can do that as well. And that was the first challenge of not having enough resource. So we increased the team. We added an extra person. I think every year we added an extra person, and now our MRM team is about 6 or 7 people from that 1 original. So we made huge investments in the people, but that wasn't enough. I mean, it wasn't that they were just the people that wave the scoreboards at you and tell you how you're doing. Because as I said, it's an emotional space for a lot of people. Our cotton expert is the most passionate guy about cotton. He can talk to you about cotton for hours if you want to, wave a results chain and tell him what his results have been. So we had to create a culture. We had to create a culture of getting data, of valuing data, of being objective about our assumptions, and being very disciplined. And we had to go out and collect a lot of that data ourselves. It wasn't available somewhere that we could just purchase. And we created dashboards like this. We created lots of results chains and so on. But really, there's a difference between, I think, the earlier years of our projects when we had results chain and the later years of our projects when we really used them we use them on a quarterly basis in Enterprise Partners. Probably our intervention managers more frequently than that. But as management, we sit down every quarter and go through results chains and talk through what are we learning. I guess it was in the earlier years that we said, do we want to pursue this thing called the DCED standard? And I think there are 2 reasons for me, why I pursued it. The first one is, so I'm a team leader. I have a background. I understand economics. I do understand a bit about statistics. But, my leather sector lead, I can sit down and challenge them on a lot of things. My garment sector lead, even my finance department, my communications team. I can really get under the bonnet of the work that they're doing. But in MRM, that's not the case. It's very technical. It is imprecise. And there's a lot of judgment calls to be made. And you can get 2 people to come and say, what should we do here? And they can give you different opinions. So having an external opinion, having people come in, and through the DCED process, we had different consultants come in and give us guidance along the way. We didn't just go straight to an audit. And they said, look, here's the theory, but here's how you apply it. And that was incredibly helpful for us. And more importantly, this was a multi-year project for us in terms of applying the DCED standard. It was a process that we got to, or that we're still getting to. I think we've still got more to be done. And so, yeah, certainly we didn't want to reinvent the wheel. I think those are, for me, the two main reasons. Then came the audit. We, last year, took the brave decision to actually be audited by the DCED. They sent out two excellent auditors, Hans Posthumus and Moaz. And it was quite a nerve-wracking process, to be honest. I think we were, after we'd decided to do the audit, we sort of thought, oh God, what if we don't pass this audit? Okay, let's check. But because we had been for several years building and and not reinventing the wheel, but building our systems, I think it was largely a comfortable process. For me, at least. I know my MRM manager, who was Adam at the time, and a huge amount of this credit goes to him. I know he was very uncomfortable through the process because this was really much a validation of a lot of his work. But they came out for a few weeks. I think we got the warning signs when they sent us a request for documents, and that request for documents was 2 pages itself of bullet points of different documents that they wanted. They came out, they asked lots of questions, they were very structured, they sat down with the teams, they knew our stuff as well as we did, which I respected. A lot of people come out having not really read all the documents. These guys did. So big credit to them for that. But the conversations, every team that went in and spoke to them before, they felt like they were going in and sitting an exam. But they'd come out of it thinking, I wanted to talk more with them. It was a really incredible conversation. I didn't want it to end, but they didn't have any more time to talk to us. They exchanged business cards and said, can we keep talking? So the process itself was actually really value-adding, and it was just giving everybody a second opinion on things, a little bit of a look into sort of where we could do better and how to improve. So it wasn't as daunting as it seemed at the beginning, but it was a process that was intensive, and it took a lot of results. But I think the investment was worth it, because the main thing is, once we've been audited and an enterprise partner's got a very high score, I think we got 96%, which Adam tells me was very good. It was incredibly comforting for our clients to know that that our systems are robust, because, as I said, there's a lot of judgment calls in there. There's a lot of discussion. But to have a standard to come out and say that, I think is incredibly valuable. I'll just conclude with a couple of lessons that I've learned in our journey in applying the DCED standard, which has given me a lot of guidance into how to do results measurement and management properly. Number one, I think commitment is key. When my intervention managers know that I'm going to read every results chain every quarter, when I'm going to read every monitoring report that comes back from the field, they start to see that it's not just the MRM team that cares about this, it's management, and this is part of their accountability to management. And so again, a big part of that was the MRM managers, and Adam as well, coming into my office and constantly putting MRM on my agenda and saying, did you see that report? Do you know what we need to do? We've got concerns over here. I'm not sure the intervention manager is adapting quickly enough to what the data is telling them. And so having a strong relationship between the MRM manager and for the MRM manager to really be a central part of the management team, I think is critical to creating a culture where people who are not typically used to being so data-driven, who are a bit, passionate about their work, for them to really change their way they work. I think it needs to come from the top. I think the second thing is you need to not just empower your MRM team, but you need to invest in them. Every year we added resources, and our MRM team is a big team of very high caliber people, and they need to be high caliber. They need to know the sectors as well as the intervention managers. They need to be able to talk about it, so they need to really specialize in a way in specific sectors. So we did a lot of work around kind of matrix management structures where the MRM focal people were partly accountable to the sector teams and partly accountable to the MRM managers, so that they were embedded, so they were really trusted, but at the same time they had an outside-in perspective. But there needs to be a lot of them basically to cover all the ground. And for me, it's a no-brainer that adding more MRM people will give you more feedback, more data, better decisions, more results. But it takes a lot of persuasion of your director, of your clients, of different people to keep adding in those areas, as opposed to people on the front line who are delivering. I do think in MRM, perfection is the enemy of good. We can have perfect systems. We can have, but we'd be missing the point. You know, it's really about, for me at least, MRM is really about making sure that people get the right information at the right time, which means it's not perfect. It's not been analyzed to death. It doesn't cover every last member of the population. It is a sample. It's an indication. And I think sometimes you do have to be able to push back on your own MRM team who want perfection in what they're doing. I've talked about the audit building trust, but I really saw that with our donor. I think I believed in it before, but now I know it. But I do think that there's more that could be done around building very lean data systems, things where we can capture rough data very quickly, using technology, using text messages, things like that. And where we're not the only stakeholder using our data and looking at our results chains, but where a lot of people are able to benefit from that data, businesses not least. Okay, that's my talk. Happy to take questions. Adam, do you want me to pass the host back to you, or can you do that? Or is it Jim?
I think it's Jim. You need to pass it back to Jim, or Jim can take it.
I don't need it right now. Thank you very much, Nebil and Adam. It was very clear. Couple of questions coming in already on the chat box. Very welcome. What kind of, and we've got some numbers there, what kind of jobs are, what kind of jobs? So this is the jobs that you mentioned. Your achievement slide, Nebil, was very interesting. You glossed over it slightly, but there was I had a lot of interesting, curious kind of questions around that. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about jobs, measuring income. That's a sort of question that a lot of people are concerned with. You know, what can we measure with some credibility when it comes to jobs and employment, which many donors take as their headline kind of lens to view programs through. How did you square that circle?
Yeah, good question. Okay, I can see the questions now. Yeah. So what kind of jobs are they? Just in terms of the jobs, a lot of them are in the sectors that we work. So a lot of them are in factories, basically. And these are full-time equivalent jobs of people working in industrial parks and places like that. The vast majority of them are things like that, but mostly in factories. We measure incomes for a lot of the work that we do on the farms. Are the jobs created by the project? No, I don't believe we create these jobs. I think we, and at the beginning of the project we had a measurement around attribution and plausible attribution, and we got into a lot of interesting discussion. I'm not quite sure if it was value for money in terms of the number of hours we spent talking about plausible attribution, but we in the end concluded that we would measure jobs that we've contributed to the creation of. I mean, I'm very clear that it's the private sector that create jobs, not us. But we can contribute to that creation to a sufficient degree, which again is a bit subjective, but that's what that number is about. And the income increment is around, our theory of change is really around kind of building industries that link to agricultural sectors. So we have the garments value chain that links back to cotton, the leather value chain that links back to livestock, and the fruit and vegetable, the agro-processing value chain that links back to fruit and vegetable farming. So as we build those chains, we're expecting to see more farm produce and more people earning more income from the farms. So that's where that comes from, but in our, where the income increment comes from. There is also an argument around income from the work that we do in creating loans and access to finance to people, and that creates income in the economy. But at the moment, we've not really captured that to a degree that I think we're comfortable to start reporting on. I can see another question.
Yes. Well, actually, there's been a private one which maybe I'll just pop in there next, from Namukwaya Proskovia, asking about the relationship between annual performance reviews that are managed by the client and the DCED audit. Or more broadly, I wondered if you could say something about your own MRM system and how, and that being audited and coming out rather well relative to donor monitoring, donor review, donor evaluation processes. I think EP had quite a big sort of external evaluation. I wondered if you could say anything about that experience.
Yeah, yeah, we do. We have a lot of support from different angles. So we've been through the DCED process. We also have an external reviewer that's appointed by the donor that do some very interesting work. It's Palladium Group that do it. They do they actually are looking at, they have a baseline, a midline, an end line, and a post-end line. I'm not sure what the correct term is, but or an ex-post, I think it's called. 7 years after the project, to look at the impacts that we've had on the sectors that we've been working on and on the economy. And every year they do an annual review in addition to these surveys that they do to look at the impact on sector performance and jobs. And every year in the annual review, they spend about 2 weeks with us in the field half of the time, and in the office half of the time, talking with our team. So it's quite a rigorous process of going over and over issues that change as well. I mean, you have a results chain and it looks fine, and then something happens and you record it, and then you realize there's a problem with your results chain because you didn't anticipate some sort of a consequence of what you've done. So I would say it's been really helpful having different perspectives, to be honest, and I found certainly that the people coming in to support us with the DCED gave us a couple of perspectives around what we were doing in terms of, are we really getting the right feedback? Are we really getting the right information to make decisions about how to scale up and things like that? That was for me very much the value of the DCED contributions. Whereas in the annual reviews, they had a terms of reference, and their goal was to say, if we've reported 20 outputs, did we achieve those 20 outputs this year? So it was a bit more about the result than the process. So I thought the two were quite complementary.
Excellent, thank you. Adam, I don't know if you want to chip in at all here, because you were on the sharp end for some of this.
No, I think Nebil summarised it very well, I think.
Okay.
Much like that.
In that case, let me take the next question that came in was from Amori privately, saying, where did your project not meet the DCED standard, and which areas did your system fail after the audit? What advice do you have for us in that regard from DAI Nigeria Made? Let me, I don't know if you want to say anything on that, Nebil, but before you do, let me just say that the audit report for enterprise partners is on our website, the main body of the report. So you've got 13 pages of quite detailed breakdown of where the strong and relatively weaker points were in the system. You can find for all the audits that scored more than 85% on the compulsory control points, you can almost all of them you can find the audit report for download. So there's probably about 20 or 30 audit reports there that you can see. What you don't see from that is what programs did in response or reaction to the comments in the audit report, but you do have a lot of information about what people, what feedback people got in the report. Anyway, Nebil, I don't know if you want to add to that at all.
Yeah, Adam probably lost a bit more sleep than I did over some of those points that we lost, but so I'll give him a chance to talk in a minute. But it was more about the sectors. I remember in the leather sector, there was a lot more that needed to be done by the team there. I mean, we lost very few points, to be honest. But I think one main point of feedback that we took away was that in some teams that kind of that culture of really respecting the results change and the strategies was there, and in some teams it wasn't as much. And we had a really interesting discussion about why that might be, and personality types, both on the MRM side and on the technical team side, and how to make that work. So it was more art than science that I recall, certainly. Adam, I don't know if you want to add anything before we go on to some of these other questions.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. As you said, I don't think we didn't really lose many points, and the audit report is quite interesting if you read it, because the audit report has a huge list of recommendations and things which could be better. And I read all of it thinking, oh, we've clearly failed, and then you get to the end and we basically got top marks. And what I took from that is that the audit process, although it's very tough in its scrutiny, it kind of accepts that programs do make mistakes, and you do have errors and minor things in the results chain. And as long as you have a system to try and catch them and improve it as much as is reasonable, it doesn't expect perfection. In terms of what I think we could improve, now I'm 6 months out of date, but when I was there, I thought our system of monitoring differentiated results by gender was quite crude, in that we split up disaggregated results male-female, and we had kind of a framework for trying to think through how results were different for men and women, but we hadn't really used it effectively. And as Nebil rightly said, I think there are differences between different teams in terms of how well the MRM team worked with the intervention teams, and this is really critical to the success of the MRM system. If that relationship isn't working, it's very difficult to build anything else.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, Adam. Yeah, I think there was also something around qualitative indicators as well as quantitative indicators, but we'll go back into the report and take another look at that. There's a few questions, Jim, coming through. A bit of a backlog. Should I try and respond to them?
Well, we probably can't respond to all of them in the time that we have. So my suggestion would be take the ones that are most specifically on measurement and MRM, because some of them are rather broader and very interesting, but not directly related to MRM. Sure.
Okay. So there's a question about our 7 people in MRM enough. I think that's enough for us at the moment. Our team is about 40 in total, so that's a good balance. 40-something, I think. We could always have more, but I think 7 is good. How effective applying
structure, Nebil?
Yeah.
Each kind of sector had between 4 and 5 technical people, 3 to 5, and then each sector had 1 MRM person embedded. That was the overall structure we used, and I thought it worked quite well.
Yeah, you've just reminded me. There was one thing that we did to kind of make the MRM thing work quite well, and I remember you were quite excited about this, Adam, was rotating people between the technical team and the MRM team on kind of short rotations. So getting 1 or 2 of the intervention managers, especially when we'd hire them fresh, we'd put them for the first 3 months, even a sector lead actually, we put them for the first 3 months in the MRM team, and then put them in the technical team so that they could see both sides of the coin or of any argument a bit better. And similarly for MRM doing the same thing. Really trying to break down any perceived walls between MRM and the technical team was probably more important than the number of people in that team.
Nebil, there's a question here that was sent to me privately from Marianne, and I think it is quite an interesting one for everyone. So perhaps if I could just put it into the mix. It's about the relationship between the log frame, the logical framework, which is available publicly on the DFID website, and your intermediate stages in the results chain. And could you say anything about where the intermediate stages can be found in the log frame?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, our log frame at a basic element has outputs around businesses innovating generally in the support markets, and then outcomes around core market firms changing their practices, and impacts roughly around, and also outcomes around sales and investments by those core market firms as a result of changing practices, and then generally impacts of jobs and incomes. So our results trains to some extent will mirror that with just a lot more detail. But obviously our log frame is a lot less flexible than our results chains. And that's rightly so. I think, you know, a log frame is quite a fixed thing. One thing I would say is the log frame is very much a contractual document, and so something that is often less meaningful in the day-to-day than the results chains. So we spend a lot more time on the results chains, which have been mapped to the log frame in the first place, so that it is easy to see. But I think the log frame is something that when we get to the year-end reviews and things like that, that's when we start to really scrutinize what results in our results chains really do map over into the log frame per the standard, and so on, and what is more of a kind of, you know, this is what we think, this is the data we're getting, and this is what we're using to inform our decision making on how to manage an intervention.
But you didn't find a mismatch between the log frame and the results chains?
I mean, I think the mismatch was more to the extent that the log frame was a fixed contractual document that was not flexible. So when we started to learn that there were different pathways to getting the results that we, you know, were looking for, you know, there was an assumption in the log frame that you do innovations with companies, they invest money in something, and that creates jobs, and that creates growth. Whereas actually, you know, sometimes there were some big innovations that created lots of jobs without any investment, or where the jobs would come before firms would increase their sales, whereas the log frame would presume that the sales as an outcome comes before the jobs as an impact. So I would say the pathways to impact was an area where the log frame was mismatched a bit because it wasn't flexible to be changed all the time based on ways we were learning to create development.
Interesting. Are the results chains public?
We put our market strategies up online. I don't think we put our results chains up online, but we can do. Be happy to share with you a whole bunch to attach to this presentation.
Well, maybe one or two examples would be welcome, judging by the questions. Anyway, are there any other questions there that strike you as particularly answerable?
There's something about sustainability. It's probably not such an MRM question. But if you have anything, Jim, you'd let me know.
No, well, I think we've done extremely well. We've got 5 minutes left. I would like to say a couple of words about the forthcoming webinars, and so unless anyone's got any burning questions, I will.
I'm putting my email address there. If anyone wants any further information, I realize it's not in the presentation.
Yes, several people have said that they would welcome seeing example results chains. Maybe we can put a couple on the presentation that we put on the website at the end.
Sure.
Just to give people an illustration. Thank you. Well, all right. I think we've reached a natural pause. We've certainly tackled most, if not all, of the tightly results measurement focused questions. So I'd like to thank Nebil and Adam very much for their contributions and very clear elaboration. Oh yes, Nebil, you sent your email just to me privately and not rather than to everyone. Yeah, good. I'd like to thank all of you for participating. A lot of people showed up and managed to get the technology working, so well done on that. We will put a recording on the website in a day or so. We do have webinars coming up on the 28th of March, a troubleshooting clinic, which sounds a bit fierce, but is in fact intended to answer any questions that you might have that you didn't know who to ask or how to ask. So please do send, probably easiest to admin@enterprisedevelopment.org, any questions that you have and any clarifications that you'd like around the DCED standard. And on the 28th of March, we'll have a more interactive webinar where you can pose the questions that you like. Then on 24th of April, we have UNCDF Shift, which is applying the standard and using it for adaptive management in financial inclusion, with Muaz Jalil and someone from UNCDF, so that's quite an exciting departure. And then on the 9th of May, we have results beyond number, measuring impact on women's economic empowerment with a market development facility. So that is going to be very interesting as well, very complex subject. What I'm going to do now is put a feedback form link in the chat box. We welcome your feedback, particularly on